So with influence and persuasion, I do the Doctor Strange thing and put the warnings up front. So these are not Jedi mind tricks or mastering the dark arts. These are some insights to help you dial up your executive presence. These are not used for malicious purposes. Actually, they only work if you're authentic and you're coming from a good place. So the first one is mirroring. Mirroring is when you subtly match the physiology of the person you're trying to connect with. Their actions, postures, gestures, cadence of speech, things like that. I was working with this executive one time, and I was like genuinely trying to connect with this person. I was getting nowhere. I started to just subtly mirror him. Like, you know, he crossed his legs, I crossed my legs. He leaned in to share information, I leaned in to receive the information. And actually within minutes, his body language completely opened up. People respond positively to others who seem similar to them. A cousin to that is style flexing. That's adjusting your communication style to suit the person you're trying to connect with. You're being empathetic to how they express themselves, and it also allows you to be more productive with the people who you're trying to communicate with. You know, if you have different leadership styles, or if people talk in different ways, like this is always, and like a lot of really polished leaders do this, where they adapt their style as a way of being gracious and empathetic to the people they're working with. Like some millennials I work with, like their main method of communication is text messaging, because that's what they're comfortable with. And I just use that and it works. I'm a pretty significant introvert. I had a manager who was really good at style flexing. So he would always make sure to give me like time and space to process things. It was great. Next one is pushing back effectively. Like during your onboarding, your role may not clearly be defined. Your manager or other senior leaders are going to come to you with like additional requests. So either for your time, your expertise, or human capital. Now, if they want something that's aligned with your goals, great. If not, here are 2 pieces of language to say no respectfully. And I got these from a colleague of mine. I used to work with Jenna. She was amazing. Like she was just so good at language. Like she could talk her way out of a sunburn. It was awesome. So if a leader comes to you with an ask, you may say something like, yes, I can do what you need. What would you like me to deprioritize? This language puts a consequence on what they want you to do. I can do that, but I have to give up this. The next one is, I understand you need X, I can give you Y. I see that you need 3 developers, I can give you 1. I understand that you want to meet, I can give you 10 minutes. And I fully acknowledge like saying no to leadership is hard, but pushing back effectively influences people that your time and your expertise are valuable. The next one is, don't use fear. Fear is a horrible way to influence. Like people who use scare tactics or intimidation, they're not really effective leaders. Actually, fear only works once. After that, it has a negative effect and it's detrimental to you and what you're trying to do. Anyone who's taking care of like little kids at some point knows that fear is just a useless motivator. So when you're trying to persuade someone of something, it's really helpful to tie your request to an overarching positive goal that's specifically important to them. If your request is aligned with their work or their goals, it's great, or even their personal aspirations, or sometimes a higher calling. Like you'll have a lot more success. And the last one, which is really effective, it's called anchoring. Anchoring is using a positive internal trigger to manage a negative response. For example, I get really anxious when I do public speaking. The technique that I use is I think about a time I did something similar that had a positive outcome. Like I gave a talk and it really helped people. So I think about that moment and the positive feeling that was associated with. And then I'm anchoring that memory to a good internal response. That memory now becomes a trigger to reduce my anxiety. So before I talk, I think about that moment, I have a positive reaction, and now it's a trigger that reduces my anxiety. Another example, and you could use this with your team when you're trying to influence better performance. Like if one of your direct reports comes to you with a problem, one way you can use anchoring is to say, okay, well, what did you do the last time you had a similar problem? Maybe it wasn't at the scale or scope or level, but similar. And then you listen to them and you think about the situation and you say, well, all right, well, you figured it out. Let's work through the steps you took to solve this. And let's try to make that a core behavior that you're thinking of. And, always as a leader, you want to add like, look, I'm 100% here to help you. Let's work through this. Now, I'm aware of the time. There is an exercise to help you with a resource. I'm not going to do that, but I will put that in the notes when you give the feedback. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I'll make sure we have questions for you. We covered a lot of ground, Adam and I hope we've given you a ton of different tools to help you in your new role. Quick thanks to Yumi Toka, Vanessa Kalina, David Nelson, Brent Brooks, Bob Calvano, and Jen Aldrich, who's awesome. Thank you for your insights and feedback. I hope this masterclass is a good resource. And as you're onboarding, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. It's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of challenges, but you're going to get through it. You're going to have a positive outcome. Just be kind to yourself. None of this is easy. Just give yourself a break and keep at it. So thank you very much. And I'll stay here as long as you need me to. I'll answer any questions you have. And if you post them and we don't get to them, I'll respond like in the channel. Okay. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. A huge thank you to you, Andrew. Let's go ahead and spend some time on the questions that were kind of lingering. How do you go about clashing leadership styles between you and either like, is your managing down to the side or up?
I'll give the high level answer to that if we didn't cover that in the thing. Like, one, have the conversation, address, dig into difficult conversation, because as a leader, you should be doing that anyway. And at the end of the day, you're both trying to lead.
I want to add on to that. And I'm not sure how many of you have values like that your company, like high level principles that your company uses, but that's something that we've noticed is a huge difference at InVision is as soon as we threw in like compassionate candor, like we use that almost as a shield to say like, hey, I'm going to give you some compassionate candor really quick, which is one of our main principles. And as soon as we bring out these values, it's almost like it immediately takes down the tension of a conversation, knowing that like, hey, we are going to something that we all agreed on when we joined this company. And when you pull out that value, you're all of a sudden able to have like whatever the conversation is depending on the value. So for direct, really difficult conversations, even if you don't have those principles, you can create team values as well. There's a great book if you are going to be doing anything that has to do with like just being more comfortable as you're being more direct. A lot of you probably heard about this, but it's Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I highly encourage that you pick it up if you haven't read it already. It's been a game changer for me personally. Before we get to the new question, I feel like we have to circle back to one of the older ones.
Okay.
Talking about basically decentralized remote leadership. Andrew, if even we can't really touch on this one, are there any good resources that you might know of?
A lot of the techniques that we talked about today can be applied. You don't have to be in person to do that. And that was a specific agenda that I had in the back of my head too. Also as well, you want to be really tuned to your team because you don't have that day to day. Even if, and this is something like when I had global teams too, even if it's like a 5-minute phone call at the beginning of your day. Hey, what's up? What's going on? Because when you have those regular interactions with your team, you're going to pick up on tone, breath, language, pauses, how they approach things, the language that are all using, which are all cues into the emotional calibration and the happiness of your team. There's actually I have a really good piece of note. I have a really good thing about this. I will throw it in the notes.
120 seconds we have left. Try to get to this last question. How do you overcome resistance from individuals or other teams if you want to dramatically change the way the company works?
I will first say that's really hard to do. You can't have full overhaul of change. And I would actually recommend you not to do that because, as I said before, if you don't fit into the ecosystem will spit you out. I have had success with incremental change. Just little bits here and there. I've also had success where inviting them into the problem. And we talked about that a little bit in the last masterclass that we did, like work with them. Be like, hey, I know this is something different. I know this is something new, but I want to work with you to solve this problem. Those are the two things that I would think about off the top of my head, and we're done.
Yeah. I would double down on that too, is make it about the problem, not about the solutions, and then invite them in to basically do like problem mapping. And I've heard really great tactics on like creating customer journeys through that problem and doing that customer journey with whatever the counterpart is. And you'll immediately see the attitude switch. We just hit time. A huge thank you again to everybody, not only for being here for the hour, but actually like participating, asking like waterfall questions, which is really, really, really great. And also giving back. And again, a huge thank you to Andrew for your time. Really appreciate it.